All right, let's get to it. Let's get to it. NCAA indoor championships just capped off this past weekend. Going to do a quick recap as I wanted to. Was going to dive in and actually make something, but I figured let me just like actually make a quick or just go live to quickly talk through some things on Tuesday when I go live at my regular time. I'll talk about some other stuff in terms of like previewing the USA. I'm sorry, the World Indoor Championship. Um, so yeah, today we're just gonna kind of talk through some of these NCAA results. Probably won't be too long, but we'll kind of chop through. And if anything else does come up, then we'll be able to dive into some of that. But appreciate y'all for jumping in. We'll probably have like a smaller crowd, which actually might be good because it's a Sunday afternoon as opposed to a Tuesday night. So we'll just kind of run through some of these different results and some of these highlights, some things in context, some things that I thought were pretty interesting as it relates to the NCAA championships this past weekend. Of course, the sprints, the hurdles, and some of the jumps. So there weren't like too many. There really weren't some amazing performances on the jump side, unfortunately. Even though some things went to chalk, there were some surprises, but overall, pretty good overall. So yeah, I mean, we're gonna talk about some of these high quality and main performances for sure. Absolutely appreciate you for jumping in. Appreciate you for jumping in as always. Again, this isn't the normal time, but wanted to just dive in real quick to be able to talk about things. Also got to fit things into my schedule as best as possible. All right, so let's go ahead and get started. And of course, I think the core thing that we got to jump into and talk about is, of course, Garrett Calland in the 200, 19.95 seconds to not only break the NCAA record, but to become number 2 all time in the history of the men's 200 meters. Now, he only sits behind the world record of 19.92 seconds, which Frankie Fredericks ran all the way back in 1996. So for context, World Athletics, they but they haven't updated, their list yet. So we don't see the NCAA marks, but I'm going to be cross-referencing them because of course there were some all-time performances. But Garrett Calland with his 19.95, again, number 2 all-time, only behind Frankie Fredericks, and puts him into this rare conversation because many of us, many people weren't even alive when that 19.92 happened all the way back in 1996. And then 2, we've seen so many athletes get so close to breaking 20 seconds, whether it is Elijah Hall, whether it was Garrett Calland himself earlier this year, Divine Oduduru, Wallace Spearman, right? Christian Coleman. There were so many athletes throughout the past couple decades. We're literally coming up on we're at 30 years. 30 years, which is actually crazy, from February 18th over 1996, over 30 years from when Frankie Fredericks, broke this world record. Since then, Garrett Calland finally actually gets close to it, but not actually breaks it. But again, we've seen so many athletes get close to sub 20 indoors, but it's never actually come until today when we're specifically talking about the NCAA. I think there was an interesting dynamic going into this final because if you remember in the semifinal or in the prelims, Garrett Calland and Jelani Watkins were extremely close. We saw that Jelani Watkins, he was in, and Garrett Calland, they were lined up together in the prelims. Jelani Watkins in lane 5, Garrett Calland in lane 6. Jelani Watkins got out like a rocket. He got out like a rocket. And this is the preliminary rounds. He was out and Garrett Calland had to run him down to be able to edge him out by literally thousandths of a second, 20.105 to 20.106. So this gave many people, including myself, the idea that, hold up, could Jelani Watkins maybe pull an upset on Garrett, right? Could he actually upset this field and maybe get the 200-meter win? Combine that with what Jelani did in the 60 meters, where in the prelims he ran 6.46 seconds for another personal best. This made a lot of people like, yo, this was a very, very special performance. And Jelani Watkins, he had like probably one of the best single day doubles in history when talking about the 60 and the 200, 6.46 and then 20.11. This is very impressive. I'll come back to that in a second. But when we got to the actual final, no competition. Garrett was like, nah, I'm not having any of that. This was my race. This was going to be my moment. I'm not doing the 60. I'm not doing the 400. Nah, the 200 is my domain. I've been running, 20 seconds so many times this year, between 20.06, between 20.12, between and the 20.11 in the prelims. I need to get under that 20-second barrier. There was a post-race interview where he said two things. Where one, he was saying, I was going to run whatever time it took to win. But he also had in the back of his mind running sub 20 seconds, potentially getting to that world record. So, he was really out for it. And this was, again, a very, very special performance. I'm going to talk about kind of what this means or may potentially mean for outdoors. But one other thing that's pretty notable is, So sorry, I was kind of thinking about it. I wasn't sure. I was semi unsure if he would get under 20 seconds because of how elusive it had been, over the past couple of years. I didn't think the world record was going to go down. I think we sometimes, again, including myself, we sometimes play around with the idea of the world record when an athlete gets relatively close. 20.06, and I said this in the preview, 20.06 is close to sub 20, but it's not really close to the indoor world record because of how tough it is to run an indoor 200. So if you're talking about getting under 19.92, yes, 19.91, 19.90, essentially at that point, you're talking about running 19.8 seconds indoors. So 20.06, getting to that realm is not as close as we may perceive it to be, right? Again, especially indoors compared to outdoors, where if you're running 20.0, it's more likely to see you get closer to 19.9 low or 19.8 high. That seems more realistic. But indoors, it's a very, very different beast. You're talking about fractions of a second to be able to make up that ground. So to see Garrett get to 19.95, again, not the world record, but this definitely, surpassed my expectations. I was looking at maybe a 19.98 or something around that. This was a very, very impressive performance. So excited to see that Garrett was able to get this performance down. Wanya McCoy, 20.17 seconds. So he almost, to a degree, kind of upsets Jelani Watkins, who doesn't perform as well. He ran 20.26, a drop back from his 20.11 in the prelims. Again, we'll talk about the 60 meters as well. But Wanya McCoy, remember last year, and I'll just bring up his profile. Last year, while he was in the NCAA, he competed at SECs, and he ran 20.25 seconds. This is in 2025, but he got injured in the 200-meter final at SECs. So that ended not only the rest of his indoor season, but he didn't compete outdoors at all either, right? He was gone for the entire year, and he comes back in 2026. So to see him not only come back, be healthy, get into the NCAA indoor final, run a personal best of 20.17 seconds. This is a very impressive performance, and I think bodes very well for what we might see when we go into his outdoor year. He's already run, again, this is in previous years. He run in 2024. He ran 19.93 seconds. So I think this bodes very well for Wanya McCoy, and I was very, very impressed and very glad to see him get second place here running this 2017, and he won his heat, right? He was in heat 1, whereas Garrett Calland and Jelani Watkins were in heat 2. So very, very impressive from Wanya McCoy to get that second place in the 200 meters here. Now, the other thing is with, where am I bringing up? Jelani Watkins, like I said, he kind of dropped back 20.26 seconds. He unfortunately didn't have the greatest NCAA day 2, if you want to say, because in the 200, we saw he ran 20.11 in the prelims. In the 60 in the prelims, and I'll actually just bring that up here. In the prelims of the 60 meters, he had actually run 6.46 seconds. So 6.46 in the 60, 20.11 in the 200. That gave him, and I kind of just, looked this up and all that. That gave him one of the best single-day doubles of a sprinter in history, like whether that's NCAA's or world's, history. So, and this is just by years. Jelani Watkins, he ran 6.46 in 2011. 2019, Divine Ododuru, this was at the 2019 Big 12 championships. He ran 6.52 seconds and 20.08 seconds. Elijah Hall at the 2018 NCAA championships, he ran 6.52, 20.02. And then Christian Coleman, at the 2017 NCAA champs, he ran 6.45 and 20.11. So Jelani Watkins is low-key like just on the bounds of what Christian Coleman had done in 2017. And then you look at Frankie Fredericks, who ran 6.52 and 20.26 all the way back in 1995, and also Linford Christie, he also ran 6.47 and 20.25 at the same meet as Frankie Frederick. So shout out to Nat for cross-checking me there. So you have a couple different, athletes throughout history who had this 60-200 double. And coming off the prelim day, I myself and many people were like, yo, Jelani Watkins kind of cooked because it was very historical. But then you go into the finals and you could see that he just didn't perform relative to what people might have expected, right? Again, in the final, running right behind Garrett Calland, he gets into lane 6, but he runs 20.26. So, significant drop back from his 2011. In the 60 meters, we can see, I'll talk about the full race in a second, but he drops back just marginally to 6.48 as opposed to 6.46. Now, to be fair, his personal best entering these championships, Jelani Watkins, was 6.52 seconds. So he definitely improved overall for the weekend here. But again, that context of maybe slight expectations going into the final. But I don't know. Regardless, I'm very, very impressed with Jelani Watkins overall, and I'm looking forward to seeing what he does outdoors. But the last thing I do want to think about is I wonder what we can expect from Garrett Calland when we go outdoors. Right? What can we really expect from him outdoors? Because he's already gone crazy fast outdoors, in previous years. So he's run 19.85 seconds. This was all the way back in, this was last year, actually. This was 2020, 25. This was, at the West Regional Championships, West first round, right? 19.95 seconds. And let me just see if they have don't have no wind reading, but it is what it is. So, I mean, we've seen him actually run pretty strong overall when talking about the 200 outdoors. But I guess for me, it does beg the question on what is he actually capable of? Sorry. So plus 1.1 meters per second. So it's a legit performance. And he ran 19.96. So he's kind of backed that up. But after running 19.95 indoors, one would venture to guess that he's probably going to run 19.7 at minimum, maybe 19.6. Again, in his post-race interview, he actually did speak about, wanting to get towards that 19.6. And if you, oh no, this is indoors, my bad. Let me bring out outdoors. If you do take a look at the NCAA outdoor records, many of us know 2007, what was it? NCAA East Regionals, I think it was. Walter Dix in the 200. He ran 19.69 seconds, which was by far, at the time, it was one of the fastest performances in history. Forget just like the NCAA, in history. I think back in 2007, you had just a couple athletes at that point. You had Michael Johnson, who had ran 19.32. You had Frankie Fredericks, 19.68. You had Xavier Carter. He had run 19.63. And then I don't even know if Tyson Gay had run 19.62 at that point, because he ran 19.62 in June of 2007. So Walter Dix was one of maybe number 3 all time. Again, I'm doing this off the top of my head, so I can cross-check maybe a little bit later. But Walter Dix would put down a performance in the NCAA while he was a junior that was otherworldly. And Garrett Calland, after running 19.95, could we actually see him get to that mark? Could we actually see him surpass 19.69? I do think that this mark is well overdue for an athlete getting past it. Now, Divine Oduduru, he definitely got very, very close. Divine Oduduru, I don't know where he's at right now. Well, I do know where he's at, but what I'm saying, like, questions in a sense. But I mean, his mark still stands. Let me not be funny. But 19.73, Tarsus Orogat was kind of a one-off performance, all due respect, with his 19.75. Walter Dix was a very consistent sprinter in this realm. He was four-time NCAA champion. He won three-time NCAA champion in the 200, four-time NCAA champion in the 100. But from what I remember, he was 2006, he won NCAAs in the 200, 2007, and 2008. And then, of course, he went on to have a relatively successful career outdoors, winning double bronze at the Olympic Games in 2008 in the 100 and the 200, double silver at the World Championships in 2011 behind Usain Bolt, Johan Blake. And then he ran 19.53 seconds, which at the time was number 5 all time, or number 4, number 5 all time in the 200. So Walter Dix was a proven sprinter. So it's like, you can't question 19.69. But just because someone runs this fast indoors doesn't mean that they're automatically going to translate this outdoors, right? It doesn't mean an automatic, okay, you about to run 19.6, 19.5. All right. I think we maybe need to see how the rest of the outdoor season, or how the outdoor season plays out for Garrett, to really determine, okay, are you on pace to run 19.6, or will you run, 19.7, right? And just for context, look at some of the guys who have run again, no one's run sub 20. I'm sorry. Yeah, no one's run sub 20 seconds indoors outside of Frankie Fredericks, who eventually ran 19.68 at the Olympic Games later in 1996. But Elijah Hall Thompson, he never broke 20 seconds in the 200 outdoors. Garrett, he already has run 19.8. Divine Oduduru, he's run 19.7. Wallace Spearman, he's run 19.6. Christian Coleman, he's run 19.8, right? Matthew Bowling, he's run fast, but 19.93, I think. Courtney Lindsay, he's run 19.8. So it depends. It really is variable. It's not 100%. Okay, you run fast indoors, you're definitely going to run XYZ outdoors. So just to kind of like, I guess, taper expectations to a degree. At least that's what I'm going to proceed to do, where I'm not expecting him to definitely run this or else. So, just some initial thoughts there. I'm actually going to do like a separate video on Garrett Callan just in terms of his or the 200 overall indoors, hopefully this week before NCAA, before World Indoor Champs, though they don't have it there. But yeah, this was a good performance. Amazing performance. Yeah, that boy Garrett Callan was running like an anime character in that final. Yeah, man, like the way that he goes off. Of course, he has his locks as well. It's like he's like so exaggerated in terms of his arm carriage. It's like crazy. I was actually trying to look back through history to see if any other athletes also run like as exaggerated as he does. I couldn't find. There probably are some, but when I look back, I was watching back, like no one indoors in the 200 from what I could find was as kind of like exaggerated again. But when you look at someone like a Maurice Green, sometimes he would have some very high, not like super high. Like Garrett is like arms all the way up, but Maurice Green, he would get his arms really high up. But he's getting that really strong arm drive and that knee drive. He was really exploding. But not even talking about from the blocks, but just like second half of at least Maurice Green, his 100. So even like Asafa Powell, he was someone who I believe has some of the best form. He really gets his arms up, but Garrett is like all the way up there. It's like he's reaching, but I don't think it's like too bad, but it is funny. I didn't know that the track Frankie ran on is no longer in existence. Apparently it was really fast. It was a really fast track also at altitude too, right? Lieven, France. Is Lieven at altitude? It's possible. But yes, that specific track doesn't exist anymore. Obviously there is a track in Lieven, and they host a track meet there every year, but that specific track is no longer exists. And if I'm just gonna do this live, but if we take a look, I think Linford Christie and all of them, they ran. Yeah, Linford Christie previously had the world record in the 200, and he ran it at. He ran it. Can I do it? Yeah, he ran it at Lieven, France as well. And so that track was really good. And if I bring up, let me see if. So you could see a bunch of these performances from back in the day were all run at Lieven. There we go. So a bunch of these top performances were run in Lieven, France. So this is all from the 90s and before, right? All from the 90s and before. But yeah, so it's okay. So it's not at altitude because I was like, nah, because they still run the meet at Lieven, but just this specific track is, it's not there. But yeah, you could that was a good track. There's a reason why Frankie Fredericks ran the world record there. There's a reason why Linford Christie also ran, the previous world record there. I'm sorry, previous, right? Yeah, am I right? Or maybe he held it before. I feel like I don't know. I'm doing this live, so someone could cross check me in the comments if you will. But regardless, Frankie Fredericks OD. Let's just put it like that. Lieven, France was crazy. Okay, so let's quickly move on to just the men's 60 meters, where this was an amazing race. But the thing that I immediately thought of was the fact that this NCAA record is never getting broken. Like, it is never getting broken. But before that, Kanisola Ajayi, 6.45 seconds to equal his personal best and the NCAA record, which he set back at the SEC championships just about 2 weeks ago. He already ran the 6.45. Jelani Watkins, 6.48. I already kind of spoke about him, how he ran 6.46 in the prelims. And then you had Kalen Walker and you had everyone else. I think I'm gonna be honest, behind Ajayi and then, Jelani Watkins, even though he didn't run as fast, this definitely was a very, very, very big drop off from maybe expectations coming into these championships and after the semifinal, the prelims as well, right? So let me just bring up the NCAA champ. I'm sorry, the top lists. Again, I spoke about this in the preview, but when you look at the guys in the 60 meters entering these championships, or at least like the top list, you had 7 guys overall. Well, actually, it was 6 guys. It was 6 guys because Jelani Watkins hadn't done it, but you had a couple guys, 5 guys between Ajayi, between Malachi Snow, between Folsom, between Howell, and between Mason Lawler, right? All these guys had run 6.4 seconds this year. So there was some anticipation on like, okay, what could these guys do? We saw Malachi Snow run the 6.46, a couple minutes after winning the 60-meter hurdles, running 7.4, right? We saw, Folsom and Howell, they ran 6.4, a little bit earlier in the year, and put down some good performances, right? So we saw these performances, and it kind of like hyped people up and hyped me up personally of like, what can we actually see at NCAAs? Then when we get to the prelims, we see some strong performances as well. Israel Okon, who, finished last year in the top 5 at NCAA indoor champs, he runs 6.48 for a personal best. Jelani Watkins, like I said, 6.46. Kalen Walker, he runs 6.50. Right. Even, these guys behind, yes, they don't run as fast. Mason Lawler, kind of big drop off from his personal best. Malachi Snow, big drop off. But it's like, all right, they're entering the final here. But then when we actually do get to that final, it just doesn't look good. Right. It just does not look good. And it just wasn't the greatest performances across the board. And it kind of, does question on like, okay, how are athletes able to bounce back after, a day of, running just a 60, or maybe you're doubling up? How does this compare to some of the pros, right? Where we see pros doing 3 rounds of the 60 in a single day, right? And then NCAA athletes, maybe they don't perform as well, but I don't know, just an overall kind of thought process there. But Ajayi, to me, this actually kind of backs up and justifies Ajayi's experience to a degree, because we've seen him, come very close to winning NCAA champs last year. And then also last year outdoors, he made the world championship final in the 100 meters. And yes, he didn't medal there. And yes, he ran a fast, 100 meter heat in Tokyo. But it kind of, he's like bringing his experience into the NCAA, saying to these other guys like, yo, yeah, cool. Like, yes, we've all been here, but I have some real world experience. Yes, I've been to those world championships, right? I've been to those finals. I've lined up against some of those best guys in the world. This isn't nothing for me. Yeah, sure. In the prelims, cool. I was only 4th place, 6.51, not as fast. Nah, when I get to that final, I'm going to show up. This is going to be my moment. That's what I'm looking at, when I'm seeing Ajayi run the 6.45 consistently. So I'm very, very impressed with Ajayi, and I think he's on pace to, go outdoors, potentially win that 100 meters. Because if these guys aren't showing up here, it's only going to be up. Right? It's only going to be up for someone like Ajayi. Now, obviously, I'm not saying 100% like Ajayi is going to win the 100-meter title, but, this could be the time where he actually does show up, at the NCAA champs outdoors and just carries that momentum through. So we'll see. But as I said at the top, this 6.45 equal collegiate record, this record is never getting broken. Like at this point, I don't know what anyone has to do to actually break this record. We have seen this record last for what was it, 1999? So we're talking about 27 years at this point. The first person to run this this is outdoors, my bad. The first person to run this record was Leonard Miles Mills in 1999. I'm going to bring it up here. And since then, we have seen a trillion people run this time. So Leonard Miles Mills, back in 1999, he ran 6.45 seconds. Altitude, but it is what it is, right? Altitude still counts in terms of a single performance. But then we have seen Christian Coleman. We've seen Terrence Jones. And now we've seen Ajayi do it on 2 different occasions in the same year. No one is breaking this record. Behind them, we have now seen 1, 2, 3, 4 different guys, including 2 other performances from Terrence Jones at 6.46 seconds. Like, what do we need to do to get over 6.45? Why can't someone just run 6.44? It's literally coming up on 30 years. And I don't know if we're going to see it in the, next year, because if you would have told me 10 years ago, Christian Coleman, running 6.45, I'm like, oh, okay. By the time we get to a decade later, someone will have gone 6.44. We're still stuck here. Like we literally still stuck here. So I don't know. I had expectations for some of these athletes to at least push each other to get someone over to 6.44, but we're stuck here. We're stuck here. It's like a cursed record. It's like a cursed NCAA record that's going to last for as long as possible until we get, someone to really, really step things up. But it is what it is. I'm very impressed with Ajayi. And again, I think his experience really played a part when we're talking about the getting the NCAA title here. So, we'll see. We'll see. All right. And okay, yeah. So I'm liking Ajayi consistency with his top end. He will do some damage this outdoor season. Jelani needs to run his rounds better. He keeps going crazy in the heats, and then dropping a bit in the final. Yeah, definitely. Ajayi, again, that is why I'm so big on experience and consistency. That is what I always look to when I'm, assessing an athlete, or when I'm, looking at an individual performance. I don't like an individual performance if it stands alone, but if an athlete is able to replicate that performance multiple times and against their competition, throughout a season or throughout the past couple of years, that is a better sign of, success, future success, than if you have like these either a single one-off performance, so someone like Malachi Snow, all due respect, or if you have like a few different one-off performances. Ajayi is showing consistency across the board against all levels of competition, from the 60 to the 100, in the NCAA to the pro ranks, and that is showing up when it comes to these races. As you noted, Jelani Watkins showing some great signs of potential success for sure. But when it comes to performing in the final, when it actually counts in an NCAA final, at least at this point, it's questionable. Now, to be fair, he still has some years left, so he'll be able to make some progress. He's already run fast. He'll be able to continuously learn. But it is something to take into consideration when you're going up against Ajayi, who has that experience. So we'll see. Okay. Well, okay, Aaron. So you're saying trusting Snow is crazy. Everyone knows Texas Tech only runs fast at Texas Tech. I mean, sure. I guess I'm split here, because obviously there's an aspect of like, at least I'll gladly admit that, yeah, I was like, yo, Malachi Snow, could he actually do something, when we get to NCAAs, right? Could he even get close? Yes, he ran that 6'4", and he doesn't have any other performance, under the 6'5" barrier. But there's a thought process of, could he actually, get into it? It provides that hope. But like, there's a few different athletes, right? So for example, Terrence Jones, he's run 6'4" a couple times, maybe once, outside of Texas Tech, if I'm correct, right? I think he ran it once outside Texas Tech. And then someone like well, he's not on the 60 list, but it's someone like what's his name, also from Texas Tech, Courtney Lindsay, right? He's run fast at Texas Tech and then didn't replicate it. Divine Oduduru, again, all due respect, but Divine Oduduru, he also ran his 20.08 while at the track at Texas Tech, but then he came to NCAAs and he also ran he ran fast at NCAAs, right? 20.18, et cetera, et cetera. This is NCAAs all the way back in 2018, right? Behind Elijah Hall. So, it's mixed. It's mixed. And good call out on Mason. Okay, he false started when he ran his PB at Tech. So definitely very, very fair. All right. And then we're talk about the 60-meter hurdles and the 400, and then we'll move over in a second. So was this the best men's indoor sprints meet ever? Possibly. Because I'm thinking about it. It's possible. It actually is possible now. That actually might be something to think about, because 2018, I think, was probably the best indoor sprints, because you had, you didn't have an NCAA record in the 60, but you had Elijah Hall run 6.52. You had him run the NCAA record in the 200. You had, Grant Holloway was 2019. Grant Holloway won the hurdles in 2018, but it wasn't as fast, of course. And then you had Michael Norman in the 400. He broke the world record running 44.5. But then, yeah, actually, this is probably the best. Yeah, this might be it. Let's actually talk about it, because the 400 was crazy, even if it didn't get a record. In the 60-meter hurdles, though, this was by far, like, this might have been, outside of Garrett Kellen, this was probably the second best performance of the weekend. Jacoby Tharp, 7.32 seconds. Not only breaks the NCAA record, not only breaks, personal best, all that stuff, but moves him to number 3 all time, breaks Grant Holloway's NCAA record of 7.35, which he ran back in 2019. So this was insane. And in the prelims, we saw him run 7.36. And he said that he didn't even get a good start. Jacoby Tharp literally said, I didn't get a good start. I was, it was poor, et cetera, et cetera. I need to fix that up for the final. And he did exactly that, running 7.32 seconds. As I noted, again, it's not going to come up here because we don't have World Athletics hasn't updated it all yet, but this moves him to number 3 all time in the 60-meter hurdles when talking about this 7.32. Grant Holloway obviously dominates the all-time list, but only behind Grant Holloway and Colin Jackson. So 7.32 by Jacoby Tharp slots right in behind that. So he surpasses Darren Robles, Greg Foster, Allen Johnson, Terrence Trammell. Right? Like these are all GOATs of the 60 meters. And of the 60-meter hurdles and the 110 hurdles. Like these are all literally GOATs. You're talking about Darren Robles, Olympic champion and former world record holder. Greg Foster, what is he? Three-time world champion? Allen Johnson, right? Only the best, only next to Grant Holloway when talking about the hurdles. Terrence Trammell, multiple-time Olympic silver medalist and world championship medalist, and indoor, like all of that. Roger Kingdom, like Iner Garcia, like these are all GOATs of the hurdles. And now Jacoby Tharp with his 7.32 slots in right ahead of all of them and just behind Grant Holloway and Colin Jackson. Very, very impressive. Now, there's a long way to get to Grant Holloway's consistency because you're talking about Grant Holloway, 7.27, 7.29, 7.29, 7, like Grant Holloway has done damage to this event. Like, look at how many times Grant Holloway just ran 7.32 seconds on his own. 4 different occasions. Forget all the 7.2s that he ran. So he's in a different realm, like a completely different conversation. He's in that Mondo Duplantis, Ryan Krauser conversation of the hurdles, but Jacoby Tharp now, this is another example of someone displaying true consistency in the event, right? You're talking about NCAA indoor champion in the 60 hurdles last year. NCAA outdoor champion in the hurdles last year, and then USA outdoor champion in the hurdles last year. That is a type of consistency that I like to see from an athlete throughout their career, where it's like, okay, now I know that you're more than capable of actually doing something, when it comes to, the world championships or potentially the Olympics, right? Jacoby Tharp still has a very, very strong future. It was just 2024 when, he got second place at NCAAs in the 110 hurdles and people were talking about him as like the next up. He's kind of just like realizing that potential now. Again, last year he was the NCAA champion and the USA champion, but he has time to grow and develop, right? Grant Holloway was a junior by the time that in 2019, by the time that he, of course, won the titles and then, got to the world championships at the end of the year. There's no worlds at the end of this year, but just to give context of how Jacoby Tharp is really building that consistency and is likely going to be one of the mainstays, if not already becoming one of the mainstays in American hurdling and world hurdling, into the future. So Jacoby Tharp, very impressive performance. And we saw 3 guys under the 7.5 second barrier. Again, probably some guys like a Malachi Snow, unfortunately didn't show up. Whereas Malachi Snow, even though at Texas Tech, he had those amazing performances, but he had been consistent in previous years, right? I forget exactly what he got last year at the NCAAs, but I think it was either second or third place. No, that's 60 meters. Yeah, he got third place at NCAAs in the 60-meter hurdles last year. So it's not like, he isn't able to show up. This was kind of a big drop back, right? Or drop down. Jaqueline Scott, Kendrick Smallwood, very close to that 7.4 barrier, but not what they did at SECs. But again, Jacoby Tharp, he is a star of the show when it comes to these came to the 60 hurdles. Again, behind Gary Calland, I think Jacoby Tharp had the best performance of the weekend. Personally, just my personal opinion. Now let's talk about the 400 here, because 400s, this I think didn't get as much spotlight as it probably deserves. I think for 2 reasons. 1, in terms of the high quality performances, but also 2, because of maybe, again, those expectations, maybe not living up to the expectations. So Samuel Ghazi, NCAA champion, outdoor champion from last year, 44.57 seconds. Moves him to equal number 4 all time. Again, I'm going to bring these up as I kind of just talk through it, but brings him to equal number 4 all time in the 400. I think he ties Karan Clement's previous world record, which technically still stands as the world record until Caleb McRae gets his world record ratified. But now moves him up to number 4 all time. So improves on I think he had run 44.72 earlier this year. I think that Samuel Ghazi was the most consistent 400-meter sprinter of the 2026 season indoors, between his 44.7 and he had run 44.8. And again, going back to the consistency that I love to see, he had already been NCAA champion outdoors last year. He didn't run indoors because I think he was injured, but in 2024, he was second place at NCAAs in the 400. He then went to the Olympic Games that year in Paris and made the final as just a freshman, right? Very, very impressive. And what I'm realizing now, I guess I realized it, but I didn't really realize it. Samuel Ghazi is still just 19 years old. 19 years old. He turns 20 years old in May of this year. He is still 19 years old. So we're talking about all the way back in 2000 and 2024, he was a baby. He was a child. Like, you know what I'm saying? Now I think he started college a little bit earlier. He had started college, I think when he was 16 years old. So he was relatively young. But the idea that he is already dropping consistent times between 44.8, 44.7, and now 44.5, and he's already been to an Olympic final, and he has already been an NCAA outdoor champ. Now he has an indoor champ, all at the age before he turns 20 years old. This is very impressive. Very, very impressive, right? Now, we still have a long ways to go for him to, there's no world champs, there's no Olympics this year, right? We'll see what happens next year. It'll be questionable if he decides to turn pro at some point after this year. I know that he does want to stay in college, but I'm just very impressed with the fact that he is still extremely young, but is putting down these great performances. And as I go back, as we've seen from the 60 meters to the 200 and now in the 400, the guys who came out on top seem to be the most consistent athletes across the board. That is what I personally like to see, and what gives me an indication, or a better indication, of their long-term success. I just spoke about Walter Dix, who in 2000, Walter Dix won 4 consecutive 100-meter titles while he was at Florida State. And then that led to him going to the Olympics as soon as he finished college and winning medals behind Usain Bolt, and doubling back at the World Championships and winning medals behind Usain Bolt. You know what I'm saying? Like, that's a better indication of your success after college if you show some consistency throughout your college career. That's what someone like Samuel Ghazi is doing, right? And I'm not saying it's guaranteed success, but it's just a better indication. All right, so now behind him, we also saw the depth of this 400 was absolutely insane. Justin Braun, who had run 44 seconds in the prelims, he ran 44.77 for a massive personal best, right? Really living up to maybe expectations, or at least the potential that many people saw. He surpasses that when we get to that final, running 44.67, just behind Samuel Ghazi. Amazing, amazing performance. That becomes the fastest non-winning time in history. Jordan Pierre running 44.85, that's also the fastest non-winning time in history. And he also, again, gets a personal best, gets under the 45-second barrier. We've never seen this before in history, where 3 men in the same competition actually ran under 45 seconds. We've never seen this before in history, right? Like I said, fastest non-winning times, both of these are. Now that's 44.67. If you look back through history, if y'all remember, 2018 NCAA Indoor Championships. If y'all remember, my man Akeem Bloomfield, shout out to him. Of course, he retired. He went through a whole bunch of things, throughout his career that led to his retirement, including injuries and, some personal stuff, from my understanding as well. At the NCAA Champs in 2018, he ran 44.86 seconds, right? And this was in Heat 1. And then later on, Michael Norman, he had run the 44.52 to ultimately get the win. But prior to that, this was the fastest non-winning time in history. But now we just saw 2 guys surpass that, and neither of them won this race. That just shows the depth of the 400 at the NCAAs this year, the insane depth of the 400. And this has been kind of a trend all throughout the entire year, where we saw so many guys. I'm just going to bring back the 400. We saw so many guys consistently running very, very fast throughout 2026, right? Samuel Ghazi had done it. Jonathan Sims had done it. Justin Braun and Jordan Pierre weren't there yet, but, they had already run kind of fast. You saw Josiah Rice. You saw, a couple guys, right? They had been running very, very fast. City Jai didn't run at NCAAs this year. But we saw a bunch of guys running fast, and that depth of the 400, I'm very interested to see how this carries through when we do get to the outdoor season, right? But the one thing that I definitely was kind of, I guess, disappointed or questionable with is Jonathan Sims, right? Where 4th place, for him to run 45.11, I guess in any other year, that would have been crazy. Because I think back to, we're in a different era, but I was going to say, I think back to the times of 2010, 2011 with Torrin Lawrence, rest in peace, and Cronnie James, and who else? Tony McQuay, and, all of them, that kind of era where they were running 45 lows, and those were winning NCAA titles. I think Torrin Lawrence won NCAAs with 45.10, or maybe something around that range in 2010. But different era. But Jonathan Sims, like I said, he ran 44.62 early this year. And myself, a lot of people, we were all hyped, hold up. He's a true freshman doing this early in the year. what can he do as the year progresses? And not only this, Jonathan Sims had run some very fast splits, multiple 4x4 splits throughout the year, whether it was on, in the middle legs, like second or third leg, or even on leadoff legs, where I think he ran 44.7 on a leadoff leg, indoors in the 400. So on the 4x4. So he had been showing true consistency, like, no, this 44.6 was not really a fluke. I'm actually capable of it. So again, 45.11 is not like a bad performance, but it does, I guess it makes me question on like, man, like either, yes, maybe I don't know if he peaked early though. I know you said that, Aaron, like if he peaked early, I don't know if he peaked early again, because I saw, he had some of those other 4x4 performances, or even he would run 45.01 or something like that. Let me see. Or 45.04. He ran that at the Tyson invite. Well, I guess this was January, but regardless, he had run, some fast times, but it just wasn't, it definitely was a disappointment, right? But granted, again, he's a freshman. He's a true freshman. So he has many, many years to progress, right? Maybe myself and others, we might have had like some huge expectations, just after seeing an individual performance, but, he has some years to progress. But again, Samuel Ghazi, he has shown consistency. Like you don't win an NCAA title outdoors and then an NCAA title indoors and then make the Olympic final as like what was he, 17 years old, right? You don't do all that if you're not a true threat. So shout out to Samuel Ghazi, 45.57 seconds, big performance. Big performance. Okay, now, the last one is just a 4x4 on the men's side. And I'm going to talk about the women, because also some good performances on the women, but also some performances I'm like very questionable in terms of like, the NCAA is ruthless. Let's say that. I'll talk about that in a second. South Carolina, they get the win in 302. Alabama, Tennessee, Arkansas. You could tell by how I'm kind of like talking through it. I think the 4x4 was not only just at NCAAs, but overall throughout the year, it was confusing, if not disappointing to me personally. This is just my personal opinion. So we had seen South Carolina, they had run 3 minutes in the 4x4 earlier this year, right? And we saw South Carolina, they ran 3 minutes, 0.86 seconds. They were just off the NCAA record, the, I guess, quasi world best to a degree, of 3 minutes, I think 3 minutes 70 something seconds by USC back in 2018. So there was a world where it's like, okay, could they, potentially break the NCAA record? And, again, Aaron, yes, Clemson 400 times are very questionable. Anyway, so I think the 44.6 was a bit inflated, maybe. But I just bring that up because, this South Carolina did this at Clemson as well. I don't think it's like inflated, but just to highlight the point of the confusion, I'll address that Clemson track situation in a second. South Carolina running 3 flat. You had Florida 302, and you had a bunch of 302s and 303s and all that. And I think throughout the year, considering how strong the 400s were going throughout the year, I had expectations, whether they were fair or not. I had potential expectations of like, okay, the 4x4s are going to be looking good. Now, there were some warning signs throughout the year, though, that it probably wasn't going to look that great. For example, there's no reason that Georgia should be all the way down at number 8 into that, like running 303 this year. There's literally no reason why Georgia should be at 303 this year, considering, the athletes that they had, considering the talent that they had, right? They shouldn't be at number 3. I'm sorry, at number 8 at 303. You also look at Alabama, they probably had more potential as well than 302, considering, again, the guys that they had. Even USC, shout out to William Jones. I guess he went pro. I don't know what he did. He ran unattached. I know you pointed it out, Aaron, but like he ran unattached, and then he wasn't at NCAAs and he didn't run the 4x4. And then even South Carolina, they ran 3 flat, but none of their guys broke 44 seconds on any of the relay legs. So that kind of showed like, okay, we can put a good 4x4 together without some of the quote unquote top guys. And then we see, and let me just circle back to the 400 here very quickly, where again, you see a bunch of these guys who are all running on the 4x4. Only one of these guys, Josiah Rice, is in the from South Carolina, is in the 400, right? But you have Samuel Ghazi, you have Justin Braun, Jordan Pierre, Jonathan Sims, et cetera, Jaden Horton Mims. But when it comes to that actual 4x4, kind of disappointing. The other thing that was, questionable was at what was it, SECs, we saw like the baton drops and like, bumping and this, that, whatever. At NCAAs, we also saw, I think it was USC and Texas A&M. I think they kind of like got bumped up together. It was like all these kind of weird situations, which lead to, it's not to disparage, but it's just like, I feel like I was a little more confused. And again, if not disappointed, in terms of like the 4x4, I definitely was looking for a little bit more. But regardless, I mean, shout out to South Carolina for getting that 3 flat earlier this year and then backing things up and getting the actual NCAA title in the 4x4. Great performance for them overall. The only other thing, just to address this, Eric, because you said that Clemson 400 times are very questionable anyways. I think the 44.6 was a bit inflated. Maybe. Obviously, we know that Clemson as a track, both in the 400, the 200, I guess, is a little mixed, but in the 400 and then even in the 60, we always see insane performances at Clemson throughout the year, especially obviously January, right? The early season, both for NCAA athletes and then even pro athletes. But then I look back at certain athletes, and I can cross check me, but I'm gonna do this off the top. Michael Norman in 2018, he went to Clemson that year, and again, I'm cherry picking. So, 1 or 2 athletes is not, representative of the entire, demographic of NCAA athletes throughout history, right? But in 2018, Michael Norman, he did go to Clemson and he ran his 45 flat. And then he went to NCAAs. He was at USC. They didn't have conference. Then he went to NCAAs and he runs the 44.52. So, that kind of did back things up. You also had someone like Randolph Ross. Do what you will. But you had someone like Randolph Ross, who also in 2020, no. Was it 2021? Yeah, it must have been 2021. 2021, he goes to Clemson once or twice, right? He runs 45.21, and then he goes to NCAAs and runs 44.9. And I think he replicates that in 2022 as well, where he goes to Clemson a little bit early in the season. He runs 44 seconds or 45. No, yeah, he ran 44 seconds, 44.83 at Clemson. And then he goes to NCAAs and he runs 44.62. So again, as I said, obviously, yes, I'm cherry picking, but I'm just doing this off memory. Probably more often than not, if you look through like the top, 10 to 15 to 20 athletes when talking about the 400, in the NCAA, some of those athletes who are probably running 45s or 45 high, 46 seconds or whatever at Clemson, maybe it doesn't translate over to the NCAA champs and, doesn't translate to a 45 low or obviously 44 high or something along those lines, right? The depth is probably more important than the top end, but, just to give some highlight on, it depends. It definitely depends. Okay, so to be fair, Aaron, yes, good point. So if you see the Tiger Paw meet every year, you see a bunch of 47 guys show up there and run 45 indoors. So as I was kind of saying, like I didn't look at the depth of, all those lower level guys that many of us are not looking at because they're not putting down those high quality performances of the 45 lows or the 44 highs, right? So to your point, maybe definitely makes sense, but hey, a couple athletes, they've been able to do it. So I definitely hear that. And I guess it's also no different maybe than like, I don't know if it's no different. Let me not say that. But I was going to say, I sometimes don't necessarily blame athletes for going to different meets and chasing a specific time. Now, whether or not you replicate that at NCAAs, that's going to be on you, right? But if you go to a meet and you chase a certain time, it is what it is. Just like you have distance athletes, they go to BU and they, in December and they run a fast time, right? They chase that time and it's like, all right, cool. You know what I'm saying? So it is what it is. But, I can understand your point to a degree, right? All right. Okay. So I'll get to this. I'll get to this when we finish up in a second in terms of like NCAAs and then the world indoors as well. I agree. Yeah. I agree. And yeah, the field events were pretty disappointing. I'll kind of highlight some of them at the end. Good point. All right. So let's just quickly finish off with the women's events across the board. Women's 60 meters. Oh no, that's the men's. My bad. Women's 60 meters here. We did see Shanice Walker come through to get the win, 7.08. This was after she ran 7.07 to get a personal best in the prelims. And that gave her gave her a personal best and, was a big performance. I think people were kind of looking at Victoria Cameron because she had run 7.09 and she had run 7.09 and 7.08 at her conference champs. So she had shown some consistency, but then when we got to that final, shout out to Shanice Walker, 7.08. Check out Lighton Levy. He actually just did a video breaking down the Caribbean athletes and their performances at these NCAA championships. So definitely check his video out, for kind of a full breakdown on all the Caribbean athletes for sure. But then behind Shanice, there's a big drop off. You have Deja Haj, 715, a bunch of 7-1s, and then you get to 7-2s. Deja Zafran, I think she was an NCAA champion last year, if I'm correct, right? And, she kind of dropped back. Also in the 200, she didn't do as well, but mixed results overall. But I think you can kind of see where this is going with Deja Haj. Second place in the 60, but you know what she did in the 200, right? The 200 is where she really did show up. And I think there was no question on what she was going to be able to do all year. In the prelims, she ran 22.28 for a personal best. And then she goes to finals. Oops, my bad. And then she goes to finals and she runs 22.22 seconds. And I think this is number 4 all time in NCAA history, only behind Julian Alfred, Abby Steiner, and Favor Ofili. I'm going to cross-check that here, but this was very, very impressive. Yeah, so only behind these 3 women, right? Julian Alfred, 22.01, gone. You have Abby Steiner, 22.09, gone. Favor Ofili, 22.11, gone. Then Deja Haj with her 22.22. Now, Deja Haj, she's only a freshman. She got some time. So we'll see how that actually does progress. But she really, really, really made her mark in 2000. She didn't lose a single in 2026. She didn't lose a single 200-meter race, right? She kept getting better and better every year. I think running a personal best every single year. Every single meet. And then, capping things off with an NCAA title and a second place in the 60 meters. Shout out to Deja Haj and everything she was able to do here. Behind her, this is where, for me, the NCAA, the larger questions, I guess, come about to a degree. Because I think we have some great athletes, but I guess I'm like, man, it's tough. It's tough. We'll talk about Shanice Walker in just a second. But good call out in terms of if she'll make the team. So behind her, Gabrielle Matthews, huge personal best, 22.55. You have Tiara Kelly, who I was kind of seeing as like maybe a spoiler, but she ran 22.64. And then you get to Jamesia Ford, Cameron Dickinson, India Mayberry, Elise Cooper, Deja Zafran. I kind of noted her, didn't have as great of an NCAA champs. But, definitely shout out to her. She still got, she'll bounce back for sure. I guess my questions are around Jamesia Ford and India Mayberry, where Jamesia Ford was a 2024 NCAA indoor champion, right? And that was a year where she beat out Mackenzie Long indoors in the 200. She was like the rising freshman. She was like dominating in both the 200 and the 400, right? She was a double threat there. Then last year, she wins NCAA. She finishes third place indoors in the 200. And then she wins NCAA outdoors. I'm just going to cross-check this because I want to make sure I'm saying this right. Indoors in 2025, I think she finishes third place indoors in the 200, and then she wins outdoors. She wins NCAA outdoors in the 200, right? And she finishes third place in the 100. I think there's maybe... So also, before I even say this, she got injured while she was at NCAA. So literally, I think it was after the preliminary rounds of, day 1 or whatever it is at NCAA outdoors, she got injured from my understanding. And that led to her, of course, not doing as well in the 100 and not doing as well in the 200 in the final in terms of like times and performances. Now, granted, like she ran into a big headwind here, all that stuff, but there was some aspect there of her getting injured. And then, I don't even remember she went to USA's, but she was injured. But I think it does, I guess, raise the question on like, man, how much did that injury affect her? And will she be able to like kind of bounce back from that, over the next year or so? Because now next year is going to be her senior year. Obviously, she still has outdoors this year. She has a senior year next year. And then like, I guess it's maybe the question around, this is the never-ending question, the NCAA system, right? Like how frequently do athletes run in the NCAA and how much benefit does it have for that athlete, or how much can it potentially be a detriment? Now, let me be very clear. I'm not saying that Jamesia Ford is running too much. I don't even know, how her and Coach Tim Hall, of course, that's at South Carolina. I don't know the intricacies of how they're actually working things out. I don't know the intricacies of her injuries and all those different things, right? Sure, I do see her running. I see the results and all those things, but it is definitely a question when we looked back at an athlete who was again, rising star, this huge, massive freshman, NCAA champion, and potentially had like strong potential in the 200 and the 400, and now maybe not seeing as great, of performances, again, with the context of the injury. Let's be very clear, but that at least does bring, things into question. Even in the 4x4, like I saw she didn't run as great on that anchor leg in the 4x4 for South Carolina, but that's a question. The other question is another freshman, because now we're looking at 3 consecutive years of freshmen winning the 200. Jamesia Ford, 2024. India Mayberry, 2025. And now Deja Haj, 2026. India Mayberry also was kind of like the big rising talent last year. She had been dominating the NCAA indoor season, goes to NCAAs and wins the indoor title. I'm going to bring this up to cross-check as well, but I think she, I'm trying to remember where she finished in the NCAA in the 60 meters. Okay, so she got 4th place in the 60 meters. But again, as a true freshman, India Mayberry was dominating. And then this year, drops back drastically, where even in the prelims, she didn't look that great. She ran 22.80, just made the final, but 22.81 in the final. So, it's just something, I guess, to keep a lookout for, right? On some of these athletes who are young, who are developing, who are making some strides very early on, but then maybe aren't seeing the progression that, many of us might have expected. And of course, this is just a few different names, but it's not a holistic look at NCAA athletes across the board, because we have a ton of names throughout history who have been able to go throughout the NCAA system and see success, throughout the entire NCAA career, and then also post NCAAs. But, this is just one anecdote for sure. And that's actually who I was talking about. So what happened to the TCU girl from last year in the 200? So that's who I was talking about, right? India Mayberry is who we were talking about from TCU. So we'll see. We have an outdoor season to go, so we'll see how they actually do bounce back. All right. Let's quickly just highlight the women's 60-meter hurdles. Nothing too crazy across the board, but Aaliyah McCormick did get the win, 7.86. Emmy Scales was probably the slight favorite coming in, as she had run 7.8 very consistently. But, Aaliyah McCormick was probably second, at least from my eyes. But she was able to not only get a personal best, but also get the title here. And she was the NCAA, she won the title last year. So she kind of defends her titles again. Cross-checking. Oh no, she was second place last year. Apologies. Second place last year to Jaya Covington. So Aaliyah McCormick, she stepped things up and gets the actual title. So big performance for her in the 60 hurdles. But the 400 was pretty surprising to me in terms of like how things played out. Thanks, Aaron. So she won outdoors. I knew she had a title. I was like, I know she won something, but good call out. My bad. Again, as I do these things off the top of my head, sometimes I'll be forgetting, but no problem. In the women's 400, we saw Ella Onojuenevo. If I'm not pronouncing it correctly, apologies. Ella, she got the leading time of 50.28, which is the NCAA lead this year. And she dragged Madison White, Sanara Butler. She dragged all of them under 51 seconds. And I think this kind of turned the tides, because the best we had seen this year was 50.9. So the 400 really wasn't popping off like we had seen last year, where, again, Isabella Whitaker and Aaliyah Butler, they were running, 49 seconds indoors at SECs. And then Isabella Whitaker runs 49.2, to win NCAA champs. It's like they were going crazy. But Ella bounces up 50.2. But then in the final, and look at Dejanay Oakley, barely makes it into the final, 51.43 seconds, barely makes it in. But then in the final, Dejanay Oakley turns the tables, 50.47 seconds. So not as fast as what we saw from Ella, but she bounces back and she gets a personal best. I think her previous best from this was 50.90 from last year to get third place at NCAA indoors. So, or maybe no, she didn't run that at NCAA indoors, but that was her personal best indoors. Regardless, though, Dejanay Oakley, 50.47. So kind of like living up to the expectations that many people might have, seen from her, where again, she got third place indoors last year. She got second place outdoors last year. She had run 49 seconds. She made the team for Jamaica to the World Championships. Like, she is a rising talent when we're talking about the 400. So this was kind of like a justification of like, all right, here, this NCAA title, this is what, this is who Dejanay Oakley should be, right? She should even be going outdoors and potentially dominating that based on what we saw last year. So we'll see. But shout out to Dejanay Oakley and Madison White, being very consistent from in the prelims running 50.68 and then matching that in the final. Like, I mean, what can you do? And she did a solo now. So in the prelims, remember, she actually was dragged by Ella in that heat to get the 50.68, but then she bounces back and does this solo. Well, solo in the sense that, she won the heat, right? She wasn't like trailing someone. But regardless, big shout out to Madison White for her performance here, and all of them. Ella, Sonaria, as well as Dejanay Oakley. Now, to cap things off here, just the women's 4x4, also pretty good. Arkansas did take the win in 323. Strong performance, and they get the facility record, which is pretty impressive. But again, maybe I did have some. I like to see 324s, and I know I'm harping on time, but I think I'm looking at the expectations and kind of like the landscape of the women and what they're capable of and what I think they're capable of. And maybe maybe not seeing as much translated onto the track. But again, let me not downplay in any capacity. Shout out to Arkansas, Georgia, South Carolina for really showing up and getting the top 3 spots in the NCAA here. And then, of course, I think in terms of just like the titles, right? Georgia and Arkansas clinched the titles pretty clearly. Arkansas kind of dominated, and then Georgia kind of dominated. I think outside of that, when we're talking about the field, there wasn't really anything too special. The women's triple jump was like, I don't even know. No one got over 14 meters. We're going to see World Indoors is going to be good. We'll say that. The women's high jump, this was like an easy win for Adesina, right? Like 1.97 meters. And I think in the series, she had closed things out. She closed things out. Like, she was good. Only one on her first attempt over 1797. Easy, very easy for Adesina. Men's triple jump, Jonathan Ceremes, 17-2. Man, I don't know. I shout out to all of them, and they all set personal best, but like the depth of the events of the triple jump, it just is lacking a little bit. It's lacking a little bit. But I would love to see these guys get more into those 17 mids. Again, I don't have expectations of like 18 meters or all that, but like there has been a little bit of a drop off, when we're talking about the events there. But yeah, and then the men's high jump, I think, was the last one where, this is a close competition, but shout out to Alof, apologize for that pronunciation. And then Washington for both getting 224 in the high jump. Performance is not that high in terms of the marks, at least when we're talking about on a grand scale, but overall, not too bad across the board. So I don't know, that's NCAAs, right? That's the NCAA champs. I mean, again, the sprints were kind of crazy. I think it does probably rank up on the men's side as the best NCAA indoor champs when talking about the sprints. Again, I have to look back through history though as well, because you can look back at like I like to look at things relative to the time period for which they occurred. So if you look at an NCAA championships back in like the mid 90s or the late 90s, where you saw a bunch of NCAA records, even though the times were slower, but this was 20, 30 years ago. So that may make it a much more high quality, NCAA championships than what we saw here. But considering we saw NCAA record in the 60, in the 200, in the 60 hurdles, almost in the 400, this was good. This was very, very good. So excited to see, how these athletes do kind of play out and move forward into the outdoor season. Will Shanice Walker try to make Team Jamaica with Elaine, Sharika, Turbo twins, the Clayton twins, Brianna Liston, et cetera. I mean, probably. I don't see why not, right? If she's running this fast already, if she's already running 7:08, I don't see a reason why she couldn't take her talent, outdoors to potentially challenge for some of those top spots, right? But it won't be easy because, as you said, you have Elaine Thompson-Herah getting back into the fold. You have Sharika Jackson, ideally coming back from injury. You have the Clayton twins who are running on all cylinders, when we're talking about outdoors. You have Brianna Liston who's coming back from injury and is a newly minted pro, right? Like, it is not easy. And I'm probably forgetting some names, across the board where Jamaica has a very, very, who am I thinking of? Let me cross check. Who am I thinking of? Janelle Smith, right? Janelle Smith is coming back from injury and she's, kind of looking to be, back into the fold to make a team. I don't know. And, but Shanice Walker, she's run 10.98 seconds as a personal best. So, who knows? She's definitely going to be trying to make something. I wouldn't be surprised if she aims for, of course, an NCAA title outdoors, but then also potentially the Commonwealth Games. Maybe that's her role for this year. So we'll see. All right. Okay. So Indoor 2022 and 2023 for the women was more high quality. Yeah, probably. Oh yeah, definitely. 2020, actually 2023 indoors for the women was definitely way more high quality. 2023 was crazy indoors. Actually, across the board. Actually, 2023 might be one of the greatest NCAA indoor champs in history. Between like the 400s, between the field events. Yeah, actually, yeah, we got to look back at that. That was like good. We got to look back at like NCAA indoor champs. That was actually kind of crazy. All right, cool, dope. Appreciate y'all. Very quick, just like overview because I'm probably not do like an individual video. This is just easier for me to just like roll through, talk about some of these results. And yeah, so I'll be back Tuesday to talk about World Indoor Champs and all that. So appreciate y'all, and yeah, have a good rest of the Sunday. Thanks, everyone.